Let's get into it. We have 10 expert tips. This one, I think I literally use it every day for data management or anything else. You can see it as a super powerful notepad. I'll just give you a list of key features. It's not exhaustive. You have many other things that you can add using the plugins. You have the syntax highlighter for most of the programming languages. So you have SQL, C#, VB, and batch command line. You have many others. You have the compare plugin. It allows you to open two files in two different tabs and compare them. For example, if you compare two different log files, if you compare two different scripts, if you compare two different very large SQL Server queries, that's very useful. You can also edit very large files. So for this, use the 64 bytes version. Don't use the 32 bytes version. So you need to use the 64 bytes and it will open relatively large files. Easily duplicate lines. You just use the Ctrl-D shortcut and you duplicate lines. For example, if you are creating a small insert into script, you can easily duplicate things. And one of my favorite feature, of course, is the column editor. It's not available only in Notepad++. Of course, you have it in SSMS, you have it in many other different softwares. You just use the Alt key on your keyboard, and then you are able to select not in lines, but in columns. You also have a powerful search and replace feature. You can search, of course, in one file, but also in multiple files. For example, all the files that are opened in Notepad++, but more importantly, you can search for the text in folders. So it will search the content of the files in a folder containing a lot of files. So that can be sometimes useful if you're searching for a specific keyword, for example, in scripts. Then you have, of course, the regular expressions that made it even more powerful. But you can do much more. For example, if you go to the library of the Notepad++ software. The second tip is about Excel and specifically how to manage columns in Excel. You need to know that you can take a large file into Excel and split its columns to have a nice table. Use the Excel menu that is called File to Columns. You can also search for duplicates. Sometimes if you have, let's say, a few dozen of a few hundreds of lines, then you just want to quickly have the list without any duplicates. You just use the Excel feature. You can have also a static pivot. Let's say you just have one table, you want to make it pivot, but quickly without having to use any SQL or put in any software, you just use Excel. And you have the VLOOKUP function. You need to look at this function. You need to check this function to see how it works and what it does. Somehow it's just a join, but using multiple Excel sheets. It's similar to the lookup in SSIS, for example, or a join in SQL where you go and take another column based on a key column. Then we switch to the third one, and we saw that quite extensively in BI project lectures. It's about the Excel pivot tables. You saw the power of this. Of course, it allows you to aggregate data very easily. You need to know that you can also just plug it to a simple Excel table, of course. You don't need to plug it to an SSAS Tabular model or an OLAP cube or any other data warehouse. So you can then easily analyze large files. So I also use Excel pivot tables often when I need to do a quick analysis on a large data set. It literally takes seconds to see the patterns because streamline the informations and you split them in different columns and then aggregate them, you very quickly see that there is one figure that doesn't follow the same trend. Then the fourth point, you have to manage properly your passwords. I use KeePass, or you can use any equivalent of this software. For personal use or professional use, you have to centralize your passwords and be able to save them in a safe place. KeePass is an encrypted file. Make sure not to lose the password or the certificate or both, but it's very important that that main password is not lost, otherwise you won't be able to open your password file. It has many different features. So for example, you have the auto type, so you quickly use a shortcut Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, then it auto type the fields you need, login, password. It can also open a software and auto type directly because you can create a sequence of auto typing. For example, it allows you to manage the login, the password, but also you have some two-factor authentication plugins. So you can even generate these codes in the software. Very interesting feature, it keeps all the history in the file. So you can see the different versions of your passwords. When using this software, you can use complex passwords. It will save you a lot of time, and it will avoid to you to reset passwords often. The fifth point is about the shortcuts and the server lists. What I mean by server lists. So first of all, you need to use shortcuts whenever you can. For example, when you are working, let's say you need to connect to a lot of different applications, a lot of different file servers, a lot of servers. Just create shortcuts for everything on your browsers, on your desktop. So you really access them very quickly. If you start to work on very large projects, then you might have dozens and dozens of servers. In big projects, it's like that. Use an Excel file, for example, to manage the server names, all the URLs. Of course, not the sensitive data like passwords and logins, definitely not. But however, you can use this file to centralize all the information, and you can share with your team. And it's also interesting only if you keep it up to date. Point number 6 is about scripting. When you do IT repetitive tasks, you have to automate as much as possible to save time and to avoid errors. When you do manual copies, you can very easily do typos, you can do a mistake. So really script everything you can. For example, all your SQL objects. You have to script from one environment to another because you cannot just deploy manually anything. It's not recommended at all. If you script it manually once from development to test, meaning you really think about if there is already a table, do I delete it? Do I just update it? Do I have some data in this table that I need to back up in a second table? You really need to be sure that it will automatically work when you go to production. Then also anything that you can script using CMD or PowerShell, just do it. If you do on a regular basis some copies, anything like that, you have to script it. Or even to deploy objects, you can use some PowerShell script to deploy files on different servers. Have in mind that the SSMS scripting feature is very powerful. You can almost script any operation that you do using the graphical user interface, and also almost script any object of your database. You can even script the full database. If you don't have the data, it will be a light file. If you have the data, of course, it might be huge. You can save a lot of time using this feature. Then you have the manual scripts. Anything that you do on a daily basis, you have to script it. You cannot write every day the same query. You will save a lot of time by scripting and saving things, and also by sharing things. You can also save them on a shared folder so all the team can access your queries. Anything that is useful, that you think useful, and you run many times a day or many times a week, you have to save it. Then all that scripting point of view, of course, is now used in DevOps. So you need to take a look at DevOps, and whatever it costs, you need to go and implement DevOps in your organization because it will really streamline your deployments. You will have less and less errors. You will have automated deployment with a nice workflow about how to test, how to validate, and how to push your new developments directly into the higher environments. The seventh point is something that I'm not sure every SSIS developer knows, is that you can programmatically create SSIS packages. Let's say you need to develop a few dozens of similar packages to load a lot of data sources, and then a lot of these tables are similar, and you have all this information, let's say, in an Excel file. Then you can develop automatically a script that will generate all these packages using loops, of course, and then you have just to adjust them, validate them, and that's it. So you can literally create dozens of packages in seconds. Use the proper libraries, and then you do new applications, then new package. The new package is the function that creates the package, and then you simply add to that package your data flows, your source destinations, and it's very powerful. So just have a look to this. The 8th point is more about SQL Server in general. This one also is a golden rule. Never ever use the select star from in any packages or any queries that runs in production. So you need to use explicit column names. If tomorrow someone add a metadata column to this table, you will have errors. Then The goal is to make your development robust. You need to think about all the use cases. Your development should be bulletproof. How to manage change? You need to manually change the source columns, of course. Let's say tomorrow you have source data that is evolving, and then you have additional columns. You don't want any select star from to break your data flows. So make sure to manually add the fields one by one. If you want to go one step further in advanced SSIS topics, you can use dynamic SQL column naming, and you can store these column names in a parameters table. Maybe we'll have a second training with more advanced topics about SSIS frameworks, and we will discuss this. Tip number 9 is about the business rules. This one and the last one are very important, so you have to keep this in mind. Business intelligence is about 50% technical and 50% business understanding. When I say that, you really need to take this very seriously. You work for end users, you work for business users. You don't work for IT. IT works for the business. Even in tech companies, it's about the business. It's not about the code that works, it's about the code that gives solutions to the business. You need to be very close to the end users, and you need to seek feedback. Don't stay on your laptop and just developing. You need to talk to them. You need also to prioritize. If you have a large BI project, you won't be able to do everything. So you need to say, what is the most important feature? And you start this feature, and then you go to the next one, after it's validated by the business users. One of the best advice I can give you, based on my experience, is use the short iterations. You can implement, for example, agile development method. You develop, you test, and you validate, of course. And again, you develop, you test, you validate. It's the validation that makes you go ahead. It's not the development only, and it's not the technical test. And the goal of this is to avoid the tunnel effect, because in BI, it can take some time to load all the dimensions and then the fact tables. And then you realize that maybe the way we were seeing the project is not what we want. Then we switch to the last point. Last but not least, definitely you need to test a lot your work. When I talk about testing, I'm not talking about only the technical point of view. That one, of course, is very important. You don't want any bugs in your code. But I'm talking about also the figures. You need to be sure that the figures you have in your report is matching with your source data. And that is how you validate that your process was properly done. That's a tricky one, because to go fast, one of the solutions to that problem is to import whenever it's possible in terms of sensitivity of data, is to be able to import a large data set from production, real use cases, into your pre-production environment or your test environment. Upload the last couple or 3 years of data. Then you have all the cases that happened during that period of time. And that's a very good shortcut to see all the use cases of the company's data. That's it for all these tips. Hopefully they will be useful for you and you save a lot of time and you avoid errors. And moreover, you will be successful in your business intelligence project using SSIS.